He signed our divorce papers with a smirk, calling me dead weight in front of everyone. Then the judge opened an envelope from my late father's attorney. As he read Dad's will aloud, my ex-husband's mockery turned to stunned silence. Welcome to life and stories, and to a story of poetic justice and self-discovery. When Rebecca's husband gleefully mocks her during their divorce proceedings, he has no idea her deceased father has orchestrated the ultimate reversal of fortune. Sometimes the best revenge is patient love. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of karma and sweet justice. I stood in that courtroom, watching Richard sign the divorce papers with a smirk that could have lit up Times Square. 23 years of marriage, and he was treating it like he'd just won the lottery. Finally free of dead weight, he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. His lawyer, a shark in a $1,000 suit, chuckled alongside him. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my mother's wedding ring catching the fluorescent lights. The same ring Richard had once promised would remind me every day that I was loved. Now it just felt heavy. Mrs. Pemberton, Judge Harrison addressed me. Do you have anything you'd like to add before we finalize these proceedings? Richard rolled his eyes. What's she going to say? That she needs more alimony? I'm already giving her the house. The house. The one his mother had left us, specifically putting it in both our names, because she'd loved me like a daughter. The house where I'd nursed him through pneumonia, where we'd planned a family that never came, where I'd built my entire life around supporting his career. No, Your Honor, I said quietly. I just want this to be over. Richard's new girlfriend, Brittany, sat in the gallery, examining her acrylic nails. She was 24, worked at his firm as a paralegal, and had been the reason I'd found lipstick on his collar last Christmas. Cliché didn't even begin to cover it. Very well, Judge Harrison said, shuffling through the papers. Before we conclude, there's one more matter. Mrs. Pemberton, were you aware that your father, Gregory Winters, updated his will 2 months before his passing? My heart stopped. Dad had died 6 months ago, right when I discovered Richard's affair. In my grief and the chaos of my crumbling marriage, I'd never followed up with his lawyer about the estate. I'd assumed everything went to my stepmother, Patricia, as Dad had always indicated. No, Your Honor. I haven't been in contact with his attorney. Richard perked up like a bloodhound catching a scent. Wait, what does this have to do with our divorce? Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses. Mr. Winters' attorney contacted the court when he learned of these proceedings. Given that this could materially affect the division of assets, we need to address it now. He opened a sealed envelope. I have here the last will and testament of Gregory Marvin Winters. My hand started trembling. Dad had built his tech company from nothing, selling it 5 years ago for a sum that had made headlines in the business section. But he'd always been clear that Patricia, his wife of 15 years, would inherit everything. He'd already given me so much, he'd said. My education, a trust fund that Richard had convinced me to use for his failed restaurant venture, endless emotional support. Your Honor, Richard's lawyer interjected, any inheritance received after the separation date shouldn't be considered marital property. Let me read the relevant section, Judge Harrison said, his voice taking on a formal tone. To my daughter, Rebecca and Pemberton, I leave the sum of $47 million to be transferred upon the finalization of her divorce from Richard James Pemberton. The courtroom went silent. I couldn't breathe. Richard's face had gone from smug to sheet white in seconds. Furthermore, the judge continued, I leave her my properties in Aspen, Martha's Vineyard, and Manhattan, as well as my collection of rare manuscripts, with the same condition that they be transferred only upon the legal dissolution of her marriage. That's impossible, Richard stammered. Greg told me everything was going to Patricia. Judge Harrison looked up sharply. You discussed Mr. Winters' will with him? Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. His lawyer put a warning hand on his arm. The judge continued reading. To my son-in-law, Richard Pemberton, I leave the sum of $1 along with this message. You always said my daughter was worthless without you. I trust this divorce proves otherwise. I only regret I won't be there to see your face when you realize what you've thrown away. My eyes filled with tears. Dad had known. Somehow he'd known. To Patricia, my beloved wife, the judge read on, I leave the remainder of my estate, with my eternal gratitude for showing me that second chances at love exist, and for encouraging me to protect my daughter's future. Richard shot to his feet. This is fraud. He was obviously not in his right mind. Rebecca manipulated him. Sit down, Mr. Pemberton, Judge Harrison commanded. I'll remind you that Gregory Winters updated his will while in perfect health, with 3 witnesses and a psychiatric evaluation to confirm his mental capacity. Furthermore, he pulled out another document. He included a video message to be played in the event anyone contested the will. A court clerk wheeled in a small TV and DVD player. My father's face appeared on the screen, looking healthier than he had in his final months. He was sitting in his study, wearing the cardigan I'd given him for his 70th birthday. Hello, Rebecca, his recorded voice filled the courtroom. If you're watching this, it means you've finally freed yourself from that parasite you married. I'm sorry I won't be there to celebrate with you, sweetheart. I pressed my hand to my mouth, tears streaming down my face. Richard, Dad's image continued, his expression hardening. I know you're there too. You always did hover around money like a fly around honey. You should know that I've been aware of your affairs for the past 3 years. Yes, plural. Brittany wasn't your first, just your sloppiest. Brittany gasped from the gallery. Richard's face had gone from white to red. I hired a private investigator when Rebecca started looking hollow-eyed and stopped smiling in photos. Imagine my surprise when I learned you'd been siphoning money from the joint accounts, hiding assets, and meeting women in hotels paid for with my daughter's credit cards. That's a lie, Richard shouted. Is it? Dad's recording seemed to answer him. Check supplemental file A in the will package, Your Honor. You'll find copies of credit card statements, hotel receipts, and some particularly interesting text messages Mr. Pemberton sent to his various companions, discussing how he was planning to divorce Rebecca once he'd secured a promotion at his firm and wouldn't need her connections anymore. Judge Harrison was already flipping through the additional documents, his expression growing sterner with each page. Rebecca, Dad's voice softened. I wanted to tell you so many times, but you loved him. I could see it every time you looked at him, even as he was breaking your heart. So I waited and I prepared. Your mother would have wanted me to protect you, even if it meant letting you find your own way first. I remembered now, all those lunches with Dad in his final year, how he'd gently probe about my happiness, how he'd suggested I might want to keep some money separate just in case. I thought he was being overprotective. He'd been trying to warn me. The money and properties aren't just an inheritance, sweetheart. They're your freedom. The manuscript collection includes your mother's journals, the ones you thought were lost in the fire. I saved them. I think you'll find her words about starting over particularly relevant. My mother had died when I was 12. The thought that her journals had survived, that I could read her words again, made me sob harder. And Richard, Dad's tone became almost pitying. That $1 isn't meant as an insult. It's a reminder. You see, Rebecca brought something priceless to your marriage. Her heart, her loyalty, her faith in you. You traded all of that for what? A younger woman who's already texting other men? Oh yes, I know about that too. Check supplemental file B, Your Honor. Brittany stood up so fast her purse fell, spilling its contents across the courtroom floor. This is insane. I'm not listening to this. She stormed out, her heels clicking angrily on the marble. Richard didn't even watch her go. He was staring at me with a mixture of rage and something else, regret, or just anger at losing out on millions. One final thing, Dad's recording said. Rebecca, I've arranged for Mrs. William, you remember her, my estate lawyer, to help you manage everything. She has instructions to ensure Richard can't touch a penny through any legal maneuvering. And Richard, that prenup you made Rebecca sign because she had nothing to bring to the marriage, it works both ways. You get nothing from her inheritance. Funny how karma works. The video ended. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights humming. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. Well, this certainly changes the financial landscape of this divorce. Mr. Pemberton, given the evidence of hidden assets and financial manipulation presented here, I'm inclined to revisit the current settlement agreement. Your Honor, Richard's lawyer said weakly, we'd like to request a recess to review these new materials. Denied. Mrs. Pemberton has been more than patient. Mr. Pemberton, you will return the house to Mrs. Pemberton as the sole owner, along with any items you've removed from it. You will also repay any money taken from joint accounts for personal use, as documented in these files. But I'll be ruined, Richard protested. I have debts, the apartment in the city, my car payments. Perhaps you should have considered that before you decided your wife was, what was the term? Dead weight. Judge Harrison's voice was ice cold. The divorce is granted. Mrs. Pemberton, or should I say Ms. Winters, you are free to reclaim your maiden name if you choose. You are also now free to receive your inheritance. I stood on shaky legs. Yes, Your Honor. I would like my name back. Richard grabbed my arm as I passed. Becca, wait. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we have history. 23 years. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. For the first time in years, I saw him clearly. The charming smile that had won me over in college was just manipulation. The promises of partnership had been lies. The man I'd loved had never really existed. 23 years of you telling me I was lucky you married me, I said quietly. 23 years of you spending my trust fund, using my father's connections, and making me feel small. And you know what the saddest part is, Richard? If you just loved me, really loved me, you would have had all of this anyway. Dad would have welcomed you as a son. Instead, you got exactly what you gave, nothing. I pulled my arm free and walked out of the courtroom, leaving Richard standing there with his mouth open and his lawyer frantically shuffling papers. In the hallway, Mrs. William was waiting for me with a warm smile and a tissue box. Your father was a remarkable man, she said. He made me promise to give you this when the divorce was final. She handed me a letter. I opened it with trembling fingers. Dad's handwriting, still strong despite his illness. My dearest Rebecca, your mother once told me that the hardest thing about loving someone is knowing when to let them go. You've been brave enough to let go of someone who didn't deserve you. Now be brave enough to embrace the life you deserve. The money is just numbers in an account. The real inheritance I'm leaving you is the knowledge that you are worthy of love, respect, and joy, with or without anyone else. Start painting again. Travel to those places you always dreamed of. Fall in love with yourself first, and then, if you choose, with someone who sees your light. All my love, Dad. Your mother's journals are in a safety deposit box at First National. The key is with Mrs. William. She wrote about you often. You were her greatest joy, as you have been mine. I clutched the letter to my chest and cried. Not the broken sobs of earlier, but cleansing tears of grief, gratitude, and relief. Ms. Winters, Mrs. Williams said gently, whenever you're ready, we have quite a bit to discuss. Your father set up a foundation in your mother's name for supporting women rebuilding their lives after divorce. He thought you might want to be involved. I wiped my eyes and smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. He did. Oh yes, he said, and I quote, Rebecca will know what these women need because she's lived it. She'll help them find their strength, just like she found hers. As we walked toward the exit, I passed a window and caught my reflection. The woman looking back at me wasn't the hollow-eyed ghost I'd become in my marriage. She looked like someone who had weathered a storm and was ready to rebuild. Behind us, I could hear Richard still arguing with his lawyer, his voice getting more desperate. But it was just noise now, like traffic or construction, unpleasant but irrelevant to where I was going. "Mrs. William," I said as we reached the courthouse steps, "I'd like to start with the foundation work as soon as possible. And please, set up a meeting with a realtor. I want to sell the house." She looked surprised. "But it's worth quite a bit, and it's been your home for so long." It was never a home, I realized. It was a prison with good lighting. I want something new, something that's just mine. As we descended into the afternoon sunlight, I thought about my mother's journals waiting for me, about the properties I'd inherited, about the foundation that would help other women escape their own Richards. But mostly I thought about my father's words. Fall in love with yourself first. For 23 years, I defined myself as Richard's wife. I'd made myself smaller to fit into the space he allowed me. I believed him when he said I was nothing without him. But Gregory Winter's daughter was not nothing. She was not dead weight. She was $47 million and 3 properties richer. Yes, but more importantly, she was free. As I walked away from the courthouse, away from Richard, away from the woman who had accepted so little for so long, I made myself a promise. I would paint again. I would travel. I would read my mother's journals and honor both my parents' memories by living fully. And if Richard's mockery had taught me anything, it was this: the best revenge isn't hatred or bitterness. It's happiness. It's becoming the person you were meant to be before someone convinced you to be less. He'd signed those divorce papers with such glee, such certainty that he was the winner. But my father, even in death, had made sure the last laugh was mine. Not cruel laughter, not mocking like Richard's had been, but the quiet, satisfied laugh of a woman who finally understood her own worth. 23 years of marriage had ended with a signature and a smirk. But my life, my real life, it was just beginning. And somewhere I was certain my parents were watching and smiling, knowing their daughter had finally come home to herself.